Nice. So we've seen this hello world quite a bit, and we've already seen this where we could take a look at H1 up here, and I could do something like color is light green. Nice, and we can see I could change my color. Um, do like gray, nicer. And the alternative version that we can use here, instead of just having a styling sheet here, is introducing this new terminology into our header section. Excited as a script. Okay. So script again is going to tell us to use some basic JavaScript code. And JavaScript is essentially going to be something to make our objects more dynamic or make our document able to be shifted around during runtime. Now, we heard that word before called DOM, DOM. And in chapter 8, in chapter 9, we kind of focus a lot on JavaScript. But if we see it in chapter 8, there's this little you can kind of break out your HTML object or your document into this thing called document object model. So DOM, or a document object model, is going to have three parts in it. It's going to have an element, and an element, again, is that same term that we used before, which means header, image, source. The second part is the text item that appears between an element's start and end tags. So a text item is an actual piece of text that we're typing. And the third part is any attributes that go along with those elements. So that sounds a bit complicated in writing, but if we actually transfer this snippet of code here, we'll see that my entire document, that's part 1, can be broken into those three sections. So the blue elements, or blue nodes, are the elements. So document is an element. HTML up here is an element. So is head. So again, head has a start and end tag, so that's an element, so it's blue. Now you'll notice here that attribute, the third guy, an attribute within one of those elements. An attribute is something we add on to a head or to an element, and which is why down here you will see something like ID is equal to message. That's why ID is equal to message right here is green. And language is equal to English. That's why language is equal to English here is green as well, because those are attributes. Now these last guys that are kind of like yellow in the background, those are just pieces of text. So again, your HTML code only is usually comprised of those three values. It's comprised of elements, attributes on those elements, and then pieces of text between the elements, start and end tags. And we have done a ton of coding so far, but you'll notice that that's actually the only two things going on. Now, why do we want to even know about this? Well, we introduced this concept of dynamic HTML. And what we can do here is we can assign a value to an element object's outer HTML. And this is a fancy way of saying that we can actually dynamically update our HTML code, either the attributes, the text, or the elements there, to kind of make a more interactive page. So what that means is that the page that you load now won't be static. If the user interacts with it, it might update it. And that's where JavaScript comes in. So that's kind of the basis of our JavaScript there. And we kind of shifted quite a bit at the start with JavaScript, introducing a lot of code right away with these functions. And unfortunately, the examples in Chapter 8 as well, they throw a function at you right away with these guys. But we can kind of go from the start with those just to figure out, before we even start coding with our before we start messing with our HTML, we can actually go ahead and just create JavaScript up here. So there's an issue with creating JavaScript in the script up here is that we can't really print easily. If some of us use Python or Java, you'll notice that sometimes we have these print messages. In JavaScript, we were seeing this yesterday. 2 forward slashes, by the way, means this is a comment, like so. In JavaScript, if I want to print something, I can do console.log to print. Where does console.log put it? Well, if you're inside of your HTML document, I've seen some of us use this already, some of us might not have. If you right-click and you go to inspect, you'll bring up this very big inspector where you can look at things, but inside of it, let me make this a bit smaller. There we go. at the top up here for me, I'm using Microsoft Edge. It's the same for Windows and Mozilla. I could do console, and now I'm actually inside this console here. So that's just a basic thing. Now, why do I want to do this? Well, what I'm going to do inside my script now is I'm going to console.log, and let me console.log 5, okay? So we'll see here on my right side of my code, I have console.log, and I'm going to save this, and it's only going to be in the scripting area. So if I rerun this, you'll notice that I have a 5 printed out there. And why don't I try doing a console.log again of 10? You'll notice here that my code's actually running okay. My console.log isn't making any issues, but it's good practice because we're going to be working with coding quite a bit. You might encounter an error. JavaScript always requires us to put these semicolons after them, okay? So essentially, I'm always going to have a semicolon at the end of any JavaScript statement. Cool. Let's see here. Double check this guy. Nice. So we've kind of seen these concepts before, but we can kind of make JavaScript a calculator. 10 work for? Yeah, Booney, great question. So 5 and 10 right now actually aren't doing anything to our HTML code. So right now we can just kind of think of this as JavaScript by itself. Again, console.log prints it to the screen over here. Oh, it's hiding for some reason. There we go. It prints it to this guy, but you'll see here that my CSS and my hello world stuff aren't being changed whatsoever. So right now, all this is doing is just printing 5 and 10 to the screen, to my back end of my console. You actually can't see what's going on. And I wanted to show us that I could do 5 plus 10 like so. 5 plus 10. And you'll see here I get 15. So you can actually use calculations in JavaScript. If I go ahead, I can also do like 2 times 4. Okay. Put me in there. So I do something like 2 times 4. You'll see here it gets 8. And my asterisk up here is actually how I get my multiplication. Excuse me. So asterisks multiply my things. And then I can log. What if I do 4/2? Remember, if I do 2 slashes, that's a comment. I was doing a regular 4/2. What does this do to me? That actually does 4 divided by 2. And then one that we've kind of seen yesterday, 4 minus 2. Okay, that also gets me 2. Let me do.
Can you do something for me really quick, just out of curiosity?
Yeah,
absolutely. On the division, on the fraction, can you do 0 instead of 2?
Sure, absolutely. Let's see if we can break something.
Yeah.
We get infinity, right?
There we go.
There we go. So again, everyone, remember, you can never divide by 0 unless you want to break everything. But essentially, I'm just using calculations. So the book and the unfortunately with the book and the presentations, it jumps directly into giving you a ton of JavaScript code, which could be a bit overwhelming. So right now, I just want everyone to notice that I'm just doing basic calculations in JavaScript. That's all I'm doing. Yeah.
Yes. In MATLAB, if you want to divide each element by each element, you do dot /.
Dot /.
Yeah. Does that do the same thing?
So for JavaScript, what we might need to do is something like a map command, like we did. Remember yesterday when we did map number to everything? You can probably map a division of a certain number to an array of values, but MATLAB's a bit different because it's kind of geared specifically for mathematics, where JavaScript is you kind of only have like the bare bones of these guys.
Okay, that's okay. This one good.
Sure. Puni, does this make sense with the basic just calculations? I'm not doing. You'll notice here, everyone, that I'm not changing any of my HTML code at all or my style. I just did that manually there. But you'll see here that my script of JavaScript doesn't do anything. The last one I'll show us here is if I do 2 double asterisk 2, what do folks think that this might do for me?
Squared.
Awesome. So that's a exponentation. I think that's how you pronounce it. So
I know that in Python, if you do like 2 slashes, you should get like the real division, right? But
absolutely.
how
So
if you do
also,
2, you're gonna have
let
comments.
me,
How are you gonna do in JavaScript?
let's see here. Um,
You're gonna call it an int, the divide.
yeah, I think yeah, in Python, yeah, if you do a single division, it will give you the rounded one, and in
Yeah.
double slash will give you the normal one. But
Yeah.
for JavaScript, that's really good. So that would be whole. What would that be? So that's, let's see, 4 divided by 3 here. So this does. Okay, so that kind of gives me the normal one. So that's what we call like floating point division, or you can kind of consider it normal division. Like if you're human and you do 4 divided by 3, you're going to assume that you have a remainder. But in computers, you sometimes don't want to work with remainders whatsoever in your code. And I think what it would be, let's see here. Okay, so it might be slash equal. So let me do console.log this one. Nope.
Boom.
Yeah. Question. Guess this one's not. I'll look into that integer one because it should be left hand. It looks like it's assigning it, but for right now, it looks like you can just do the normal division. I'll look into that integer division for us here. It shouldn't be something too different. For the time being, with your assignments and stuff, for finding the mean and the standard deviation, I think these guys will suffice for it. And kind of go from
What
there.
about square root?
Square root, I think that will be a math dot method. Yep. So what you will do is, I'm kind of pulling this from Java as well, but if you type a capital MTH, this ATH will give you this library, and this library of math has a bunch of things. One of them is absolute number, one of them is floor of a number, one of them is ceiling of a number. This one is math dot, let's do SQRT.
What is the floor of a number?
Floor would be if you take like 1.3. Actually, that's good. Let me divide this by 3 again. This way. Okay. So this guy is getting you'll see here I'm getting 2 down here. And now if I do math dot floor, you'll see here I get 1 because I'm going down a floor. So essentially I'm rounding down.
Rounds.
Math dot ceiling or dot seal would take you up to the ceiling of the number or to the next nearest whole number. Kind of think of it like you're in the middle of a house, you go down or to the ceiling there. That's a lot of discrete like mathematics stuff too. I think it's the upper half of a number has like brackets around it that says that. But yeah, you can see here already that even when I'm not using any Java or HTML or CSS, this is a powerful calculator. And I just wanted to show everyone that like this is how you could do math with it. And again, this console.log here is literally our version of a print command, because I want everyone to get familiar with working in the console area here for your HTML code. Why this operator? That's actually the modulus operator. Let's see if that will do it for us. Let me put it at the bottom. I think it's giving us 1. So essentially what that will do, the modulus is going to return the remainder of a division. So how much of a whole number remains when it's 4 divided by 3? Well, we saw earlier was 1.33. So you get 1 back. Modulus operator is a bit more complicated, but the interesting thing here, some of us might be familiar with it. What do folks think I will get if I do this one here, 210 mod 2?
0.
There we go. So I get a 0. What about 211 mod 2?
1.
There you go. So this operator is very useful if you want to check if a number is even or odd. You can check a number. It doesn't matter how much of a value it is. If you mod it by 2 or if you divide it by 2 and you have a 1, it's an odd. And if you get 0, it's an even. So that's there's a question in CS about fizzbuzz, one of those questions, and that's where you use the modulus operator. Fortunately, I'll look into, because in some languages they support integer and floating division. In other languages, it combines them, and this might be one where it combines them there. Okay, cool. So one thing here is we saw this yesterday, and you enjoy here is using var. I'm using all these numbers, but I'm just using numerical values, but I can also go ahead and approach my name here. So very similar to what you've seen where you did things like style, color, or style is equal to color and stuff like that. In JavaScript, and most languages too, when you want to type out a sentence or have a type of wording to the user, you're going to use these two double quotes or single quotes. Now, whichever version you use, they both work, but you need to make sure that they are on the same side of each other. So if I open up a double quote here, and VS Code already does it for me, but if I open up one, you need to make sure that you have an end one. But you can see here, if I just type out a sentence, you'll see hello world, this is working, and it's popping up on my left side over there. Okay, so this is the entire purpose of strings there. And you can also kind of let me just do hello world. You might be able to mess on a bit with strings. If I do hello times 2, you'll see that in this language, unfortunately, I get n and n because that won't work for me. And this is just a very brief overview of types in JavaScript. So the tree types we'll be working with, this type is referred to as a string. Do it this way. Then we could say whole numbers and floating numbers are numbers. So in other languages, such as Java and Python, they're referred to as double or floating and integer. In this language, we call them numbers with a capital M, N. So all of these guys are considered numbers, okay? So whatever you're doing with a number, that'll be there. And now you could also do something. Let me try to do hello plus 2. You'll see here that when I add 2 to my string, I get this weird string that says hello 2. And I just wanted to show you that you can actually use these operations, such as addition, in different ways for the different types. So if I add 2 strings together, hello John, it won't do an addition of h plus j, e plus o. What it will do, it will combine them into a new string, essentially. It will put them together, okay? Now you'll see here, if I put a space, I actually have this manual space in my code. You'll see on this guy that I actually get a space there. So you might need to mess around a little bit with the spacing here, but this in general is how we can get the spacing working. Okay. So again, I in the last session we jumped into very heavy functions and like working with code and everything, but I just wanted to focus more on general JavaScript, just pure with the coding. How are folks feeling about these strings here and these numbers? Is this making sense to folks? Again, this is recorded, so you can rewatch it a bit if it's there. Is this looking good for everyone? Someone really confused by this or have a question?
No.
Okay, cool. So let's get confused then. How to open the... Oh, awesome, Osmond. So when I'm in Microsoft Edge, but let's just say that we're doing our basic examples. I'm going to add a H2. You don't need to do this on your end, testing. Now, if I go into I'm going to open up my HTML file we've been doing. So now I have my testing. If you right click you can go down to inspect. This is the same on Google Chrome, Mozilla, and Edge. And when you inspect, you'll be immediately prompted to look at your code. If you press this arrow to the right of elements, or it should be up here somewhere, there's one that says console. When you click on console, that's where JavaScript occurs. So that's how I have it open. So I inspect and open it. Awesome. Let me know when you have that open, and then we can keep going. Cool. Great. And again, the if we've done other language coding, inspect is like print. That's the same thing. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, but no, never mind.
Oh, wait,
No, I think yeah, because as I told you before, I learned a little bit, but just in Python. But print in Python, you print on the log only also, right? But
yes.
not at the user screen, or do you?
So that's actually good. But Python sometimes will return an untype, so that actually is a whole other like basket of worms that's in there. But usually you only do on the not on the user, but on the console. But yeah, it's a good point. It's interesting to note as you get more familiar with these, they do things very differently. Usually you can kind of pick up the differences pretty straightforwardly. So
Essentially, if you want to like display, let's not say print because right now if we say print, it's gonna print the page.
Print. Yeah, so that's a really good point. Yesterday, if you actually type out print here, and you'll see I actually get a prompt to print my HTML, which could be cool if you want to like surprise the user.
Yeah.
But we're just gonna leave that because again, JavaScript was built to have a dynamic HTML. So there's a lot of terms in JavaScript that are built specifically for web pages.
How can I display something on my page? Do I have to create a box? Do I have to do all that just to be able to display?
So as like a quick snippet, what we saw yesterday, if I type out alert, like here,
right,
alert like this one, it will automatically do it for me.
Right, but that's not really displaying on the page. It's like it's over the page.
That's another thing we'll look at is these windows and how they work with together. But essentially, once we get past the function section, and we'll see how we can add our own code to it. I'll show you how, because essentially what you're going to be doing is manually typing out strings that are HTML code. So strings like this that have H2 hello, like that. That's kind of how you would have to build them out. So it is a bit more manual, but
should that be on between quotes?
Yep, exactly. Because what happens if it's not?
It's going to be on console log.
Yep, it's in. Let's see here. Unexpected token. JavaScript doesn't know how to read any of this.
Okay.
So you need to make sure that even though it's HTML code, JavaScript doesn't know that. It's kind of dumb like that. So we're going to need to put it into the strings. Okay, cool. So you'll notice here that the these logs were logging numbers and it's fine. But as we saw yesterday, the general idea is that we want to keep track of these values. For instance, I have a variable called name, and I don't want to have to keep typing out console.log of John all the time. Let me do it one more time. Get kind of tired of it doing it this way. So what we could do is introduce these variables. Now, as you saw yesterday, variables are something that is just a box that holds a value. So again, if you're, if you're moving or you're packing up things, you put a bunch of like CDs into a box. You write on front of that box CDs, and now when you call that box, or you open that box again, and quote unquote, when we say print box, that's what we're doing. You'll get what's inside of it. So with that being in mind, the manual way that you make a variable name is you say var name, and then you put an equal sign. This is called an equality, an assignment operation. I'm assigning to the variable called name the value of, I'll say John here. So you can use your own name in this scenario. But in general, that's how I assign my name. Now I have this box that's called name on the front, and when I open it up like this, when I open up a box called name, that's going to be at the bottom. Let me delete this guy. So I have this hello John right there. We'll see that I'm getting John again. Now, why do I want variables? Well, you can either pass them around, which is what we'll be doing later, which is important, or it's just easier to go ahead and call them more if you don't want to type them out. And this is kind of the idea behind coding, is that if I say, hello, my name is this one, right? And name, sorry about that. So I'm concatenating the variable name to this string that says, hello, my name is. You'll see now it's getting it. Now, let's just say that I made a big program where my name is John, and then I legally changed my name to something else. So you're like Paul or something. If I change my name to Paul now, we'll see that any code that I've written before still works just fine. Paul and Paul is there as well.
So the variable name, it's not like an ordinary name. It's just a word that you use to describe the name, right? You can use like X to describe Paul or anything, right?
You could do something like this.
Okay.
I don't recommend it though, because right. But in general, this var name is anything you want it to be. It's up to you what to do it. A good practice though is to make sure that your names are readable and that the variable names are descriptive. So you want to make sure, because always kind of code with the idea that someone else is going to be reading it. So if I have a variable called X, and let's just say that this is for name creation, and you give me your code, and I look at line 28, I say, okay, varx is testing, you're printing testing. Hello, my name is testing. That doesn't make sense to me. So if you have a variable name called name, now this makes more sense. I'm like, oh, okay, they want the printer name, so I can change this to whatever. That's just a general idea. But again, the var name isn't that. This guy here, the light blue, can be anything you want. Notice the color codes. The var is kind of darker blue than this guy. And console and stuff, there's a bit of color codes. So once you'll read them a few times, you'll understand what they're doing. Now, one more thing I want to show us is that, let's just say, do I always need, Puni brought up breakpoint yesterday, is do I always need var? You don't need var at all, actually. JavaScript is pretty quick with it. So you could say here is if you say something like my name is equal to, call it John down here. I'll switch this one back up here to Paul. Then I can, again, go console.log. This is the name. You'll notice here I put a space after it. And now I'm going to append my name to this guy. Cool. And you'll see here that it's the exact same. Why do we want to put var in front? It's a coding style if you'd like to. You don't need to. If you're comfortable with declaring a variable, my name is equal to this, that's fine. Var up there is just something to tell us it's a variable. Now, why might we use var? Well, there's one more keyword I want to show us here. Let's just call this one var. My name is John. I want to show us this here. Let me go ahead and say again, I want to update my name. So let's just say that I'm updating my variable. Say, call myself Jack now. So what I can do here is I can actually reassign the variable that was my name into this value of Jack. And if I go ahead and I paste this down here, again, we'll see here that the values update from John over to Jack. So that's what my name looks like now. And we'll see that I can declare it like this. My name is John. This is my name, and it prints out. Okay. Now, does anyone know what the opposite of var might be? Some of us might have an inkling of it, or have any of us heard of a term called constants before?
I was about to say. You said it.
Oh, did I say? I'm sorry. I didn't say it.
It's okay.
Great. Sullivan, would you know what I might be able to type to declare a constant?
Anything, but you're not going to change that in the future, right? Const?
Awesome. Let's see. Actually, yep. Actually, is that it? Awesome. So, great answer.
Nope.
So, this term const, it's kind of coming out of left field here, but you'll notice when I use const, let's see here. Oh. In some languages, no, I think it is const. Okay, nice. So, const of my name. What this will do now is you see that my line at 33 is running. So, a nice thing about this is that it gives me the file name and the numerical line where it is. So, at 33, you'll see that this line console.log is still running. But I get this new issue, uncaught type error, assignment to constant variable. This won't work anymore. So if I'm ever making a constant, I can't reassign it there. So for this scenario, if I want to determine a constant or in a variable, this is where I would go ahead and say var, my name, or simply just leave out the var there. Now, could anyone give me a scenario where I might want to use a constant? Anyone know of a good one?
A boiling temperature of water, for example.
Awesome. So that's really good, right? So a temperature recorder could be one. So the variables of my temperature might change, but what might not change is the mathematical equation that I'm using to calculate it, or its school name. Great, right? So school name. Another one is like pi, right? Pi's value shouldn't really change. Hopefully not. There'll probably be problems if it does. So like there's a bunch of values that immediately you'd be like, oh, that can be a variable. But when you're making an app or you're developing a web page, you might have some values that are like, I can't have this change whatsoever. So that's where const comes into play. Your name. So like for instance, I'm changing my name a bunch, but let's just say you really like your name, so you can make it a constant. So that's a way to approach it there. Okay. So again,
John,
yeah.
do you know what this is?
Tree 141.5.
Yeah.
No, actually, what's that?
This is a Python.
Oh, PyCon?
It's a ton, but it's a pi, so it's a Python. Jesus Christ.
Nice. I could use that there. Let's see here. Cool. Cool. So, nice. I could do something like that as well.
Python. Yeah, because it's a ton is 1,000, so it's a Python.
Python. That's oh, and then okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, nice, cool. So that's another way that you could go ahead and approach this one, and then keep that value the same way so that it doesn't mess up down the road, right? Because let's just say that you don't want to change anything about it later, then that's the approach for it. Cool. Nice. So we can go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if I understood exactly what is the usage for constant. I got the var that, of course, if you don't want to keep repeating the same word, you can just create a variable and use a shorter word or a shorter, group of letters.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Sure.
How can I use constant?
So the only time that you're, if you ever create a name for a variable, like let's just say, let's actually call it pi. The value of pi is 3.1. I know it's longer than this, but like 3.14. That's the starting of pi. He actually gave more. Sullivan gave you some more. So 3.1415. Now, an issue is that let's just say that somewhere in your code, you're at like 1,000 lines later, you do something like this. And let's say in between these two lines, you have hundreds of lines of code that rely on pi and it's working correctly. If you change the value, it's going to break everything there. And pi is a value that should never change. So in general, if you have a value that should never ever change when you're working with it, and again, you might be careful, but again, the reason that we're using const is to avoid having to be careful. I can instead go ahead and do something like const pi is equal to that value, And now I'm never able to do something like this. No matter what the value of pi is, the only value that pi will ever be is what is declared in this line. So if you see here,
basically it's a way to secure.
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's a way to be safe with your code, and you'll get an error assignment to constant variable. So now, what's the purpose of pi now? Well, we only use it in calculation. So like to get circles or whatever, you use const pi. So Joe, the only time that you really want to use constant is if you know for sure that something won't change. Like if you're working in if you're making an app, or let's say that you're designing a system for a factory and you know the dimensions of the factory, the width and the length really shouldn't change unless you're expanding or something. But in general, you should, if there's some features that don't change, you want to make sure that that stays like that. Okay.
No, I got this part, but my question is, for example, if I make a constant, okay,
Yeah.
the width and length, or the area, for example,
Uh-huh.
how my code can change the size of the area if I'm not
Sure.
doing this?
So if you want if you want to change area, you shouldn't make area constant. So in general, if I have my width and width and length here as 5 and 10, my area then would need to be something that references the constants. So let's do something like that. I forgot area, but let's just say I have var area 1 now. So what happens here is that even though I'm not able to call them directly, in my code, I get 5 plus 7 is 15. So you're free to use constants wherever you want the calculations, but you just can't. These guys can never be on this side. It can't be on the left side of the equal sign. It always has to be on the right side. So if you want constants, if you want a value to be updated, it can't be a constant. Does that help a bit?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And again, usually, like sometimes I don't use constants whatsoever, which might be a bad sign. But again, there's a lot of things that change in your code, and eventually, when you at the end and you're like, okay, I don't want this to change, that's when you make it a constant. Cool. So again, now we're kind of getting through. We know our numbers. We know our variables, constants. What I want to showcase us a little bit more. Let's just do another constant here. And I'm going to introduce a final type that we're going to be working with in JavaScript and in every language that you'll encounter. I'm going to call this gravity. So I'm going to make a constant called gravity, and then I'll call it as true. So it's a capital T as true. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just log. Actually, you know what? Maybe my analogy isn't. Let's just say that we're in space or something. Var gravity is equal to true inside of the wherever we are. And you'll see here, oops, this should be a lowercase t. You'll notice when I use the capital case T, it's light blue. When I type the lowercase t, it's dark blue. So you'll see here at line 40, when I do console.log gravity, I get this term over here that says true. And that's essentially, that's one of the two outcomes that can be here. Does anyone know what the opposite of this one would be?
False.
Awesome, right? So the opposite of this guy here, let's try to work with it manually, is false. So console.log gravity again. Now I have false. Okay.
Huh. So from yesterday, when we learned about if and if else, so if you create a variable for something, and if you want the user to, I don't know, he's clicking somewhere, and if this is true, something will happen. Something will happen. Something will not happen. Depends if it's true or false.
Awesome. Great work. So that's essentially it. So let's say that you can track using JavaScript if the user clicked on a button, and your code will say if button clicked, then alert dialog or something like that. And that's kind of what we're kind of building up to here, is like getting this logic of code in the background to actually run our dynamic model that we saw over here. So let's see this guy. All this can be kind of built out using the logic of JavaScript and like true and false. Okay. Um, so there's going to be, and if some of us are from more math-oriented backgrounds, it might be more obvious how some of these work. But it's kind of stuff that once you see it a few times, it's understandable. But let's just go ahead and try to work with this one. There's a few things I want to showcase here. You'll see here that when I put this one to false, so at line 40, it's logged as true. At line 42, it's logged as false, so that's good. But if I log gravity again, you'll see it's false. Does anyone know what term I might be able to use here at line 44 without having to change gravity back to true manually? So I don't want to do this. How would I be able to get the false to be true here?
You need a true, or you need a true or a false?
I need this false that's right here to say true, like this one up here. So this one down here is saying false. And you'll notice that I did var gravity is true. I printed it. So that's what this guy is. I manually shifted in the false and I printed it. So now it's here. But now without doing this line of code, how do I get it to say true? So this might be a bit newer to us, but there's some identifiers in coding languages, and these are universal. The symbols might be a little bit different, but if you put an exclamation point in front of this gravity guy right here, let's see what happens. You'll notice that this becomes true. So this is an odd one that essentially says not gravity. So what that means is essentially take the opposite of what this value is. And because this only works with Boolean values because it's only true or false. So if I put an exclamation point in front of false, what's the opposite of false here? Well, the only opposite is true. So if I do exclamation point gravity, this is called true. So line 46 here, not gravity. That's how you would pronounce this, okay? So that's what the not gravity is, okay? And again, there's a bunch of different scenarios where you might encounter witnesses. So Joe brought a good point. If the user clicks it, or you could also say if not clicked. So instead of saying if button clicked, you could also say if not button clicked. And then you could do a prompt where it says click the button, something like that. So there are a lot of ways that you can kind of manipulate your logic, and that's kind of this concept of control flow that's there. Okay. So now what we can kind of look at here is working with just this true and false stuff to kind of get our code working a bit more. And then I'll also introduce some more of the mathematical symbols. So this is going to be shifting into the if and else. And what I figured is I kind of wanted to go a bit more with JavaScript code. The JavaScript HTML syntax is stuff we can kind of figure out how to run. But for this lecture, we can kind of focus more on this. So in general, after you go ahead and you have these Boolean values, you might be wondering what the entire point of using them is, which is always a good question, like why am I actually learning this? So if we take a look at chapter 9 here, we have this concept of an if statement. So we looked at this a little bit yesterday, but an if statement takes in this term of a condition, and what it says essentially is saying is if condition, then do stuff. Okay, that's like a very simple way of doing it. Now, what you could see here is, well, the possibilities are kind of endless with this one, but some of them is like is raining. So a really simple one is if it's raining, or if it's not raining and stuff like that as well. So those are some terms that we can look at. And why don't we actually kind of make up a scenario here for us? So what I can say here is let me make a variable called is raining. And remember, if I made this guy a const, I couldn't ever change his value, even if he's Boolean. So if I make a constant true, then it's always going to be true. So var is raining. I'm going to set this guy to be true. So now what I could say here is something like if is raining, then I could go ahead and just this condition here. Let me actually, I did that a bit quickly. Sorry. So to make an if statement, the keyword that you're going to need is if. So if, and then after we do that, I'm going to do a shift and open parenthesis. This is similar to the functions that we've seen yesterday with the 2 parentheses. But what this takes in inside of these parentheses here is a condition. Okay. Here. Excuse me. And with the condition, what we're going to say is if something. Now, it's a bit of a habit to only think in the positive sense of something like if true or if is something. But again, this condition can be anything you want it to be. You could say stuff like if not raining or if a negative connotation, and we'll take a look at it soon. But for the time being, what I could say here is if is raining. And what I want to introduce is this concept of statement checking. So a condition is something that will return a true or a false for us, either true or yes. And the way that we can do that is by putting in 2 equal signs. So now what I'm going to be typing out here.
I'm sorry, one more time. The 2 equal signs for what?
Yeah, that's going to be checking if something, it's an equality check. So this one is an assignment operation. This one is an equality operation. And what this will be saying is if is rating, which is Boolean, is equal to true. And so essentially, let's actually, before we delve into this, let's go a bit more with these conditions here, like the equals. So if I do console.log, let me see here. Let me do something like this really quick for us so that my console doesn't get too crazy. Okay. So console.log, if I do 5, like we've already been kind of doing, I get a 5 normally, but what I could check now is 5 equals 5. So sometimes you might do something like this, but you'll notice that we have an invalid left-hand side. So this is called an assignment operation. If you want to check 2 values against each other, you can do this thing called equals. And you'll see down here that at line 51, console.log, I'm getting back true. So what this is saying in English is essentially, is 5 equal to 5? Okay.
Oh, so you should do like if is raining equal false, should give me false because it's true.
Awesome. Great. So great work there. So now if I say if is rating is equal to false, what's the value of is rating? Well, it's true, right? Exact 0. Perfect. So that's what I say. So that won't be true there. And then we could say here, so if this is false, or excuse me, if this guy isn't correct or that condition doesn't pass, do I enter into here?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Sure, no worries. If I do if is rating is equal to false, do I get this printed out?
Oh, yeah.
Let's say here. Let's do something like this. Do we think it is not raining will be printed out?
I don't think so.
I don't have anything showing up there. So this one, let's kind of leave this one for a little bit later because I want to delve a bit more with this equal to. So we have this is 5 is equal to 5. And now, once you have that, the main thing to remember is that these values can actually be anything. They can be numbers, they can be variables. And let's actually make them variables for us. So var a, or call it var num1 is equal to 5. Var num2 is equal to 6. I can now do something like this. And what is this saying in English for me? Is num1 equal to num2? Now, what do folks think might get printed out at line 56? Is num1 equal to num2?
False.
False. Perfect, right? That's not true. If it's not equal to it, the only other possibility is that it's not equal to it, right? So it's either equal to it or it's not. It's 1 or 0, black or white. Okay.
You can do like major or minor then.
Awesome. Great work, Joe. So now we can do something like here. You know what? What if I want to say is num1 less than num2? Let's say that we're kind of like looking at it there, like, well, maybe we don't need to be harsh about it. What we could say here is do that less than symbol. So is num1 less than num2 is the same as using the shift open bracket that we used for our elements previously. This says less than num2. And now what do folks think will be printed out at line 58? Oh, I forgot. And actually, an error would happen. So, what do folks think would happen here at line 58?
True.
Awesome. True. Let's try one more here. Can anyone tell me what this one is saying here? This guy looks a bit more unique than the one above it, but it still has the same left bracket. What would this be saying in English for me? Is num1... It looks like it'll be saying less than. What's that other part checking? Well, it looks like an equal sign. So if we ever put an equal sign, we could say, is num1 less than or equal to num2? So this is where these concepts of inclusive range comes into play, where you might go, so like let's just say from 0 up to 5, do you include 5 or do you exclude 5? So if this is 0 and this one's 5, we exclude it. We exclude 5, we don't include the number there. Essentially, though, this one should also be true, though, at line 60. Great, it's true, because we have this guy pointing, it's still less than. So essentially, if I go ahead and state num1 is equal to 6, like down here, we'll see that is 6 less than or equal to 6? Well, it is equal to it, so it's still true. If I make this guy 7, now it's false. Okay. Let me not update them too much, though, because I kind of like the format there. Now, do folks think that this is an inverse operation, or like it goes both ways? So if I go down here, put another comment. So at line 58, less than return true here. What do we think will be returned at line 62? Now it's getting fun. Yeah. So this is where it can get really rough. See here. So 62 here.
Oh, it's false. Yeah.
Here. That would be false. Perfect, right? And the reason it's false is this one is saying, is num1 greater than num2? And that's not true, right? Num1 is 5 and num2 is 6, so that's false. Okay. Nice. Okay. And the last one that we can do as well, console.log num1 greater than or equal to num2. Okay. Stuff we've pretty much seen before. With the if you've ever done like actually I haven't done math so long with these ones, but again, if you did some math classes, you know, like less than or greater than, it's the same concepts there, but in coding, it can be applied to a lot of things. Okay. And this is usually with numbers, but we won't get into strings with mathematics here because they actually have their own area. But in general, if you can kind of get these guys, you should be good. So the greater than or equal to, again, would be is num1 greater than or equal to num2. And you'll notice that at 64, I get false because it doesn't fit either of those conditions. If it fits one or the other condition, then it's true. And that's something we'll look at soon, is this concept of an or an and. But right now we can see that these are kind of your go-to ones. We have equals equals, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Does anyone want to take a stab at the last one that I might be missing here?
It's different.
Different,
Number
right?
5 is
Perfect.
different than number 6.
Awesome. And the way that we say different is earlier we saw up here, right? Not equal to num2. And what this guy would say, I already kind of gave it away there, is num1 not equal to num2. And so the more you can do, it can kind of get a bit confusing because you're saying true about something that's false. It's true that it's false. It sounds weird when you speak it in English, but again, the general idea is that we're kind of talking to the computer right now. So that's kind of how it's looking at it. And we'll see here that it is true that num1 is not equal to number 2, or it's true that this guy is true there. Okay, this one is false from there. So that's that scenario. Okay. And again, stick with the numbers for right now, but the same idea here works for the other languages, and usually, though, we only kind of work with numbers here. As a quick example...
So the true and the false, you just use logic. That's it.
It's all logic, yeah. So if you... it's the same type of logic as any other language. The syntax is pretty much identical too. But the extra fours and stuff might be a bit more, but we can look at the if statements and really see how powerful logic can get when we implement these if statements. So logic is a great point here, and some of us might be familiar with this. And if we're not, that's completely fine too. This is where it can get a little bit more confusing here. So is there any questions here with this type of logic where we're just doing a single comparison? Or is this making sense to everyone?
I'm okay.
You're good? Cool. Awesome. All right, so let's see if I can get everyone confused more. So now our and or an or, essentially, with our scenarios that we've seen so far, the is raining one that we're kind of looking to try and beef out later is pretty simple. But let's just say that you're trying to go outside to drive somewhere. Logic that might happen is like, I need my keys and I need to see if it's not raining. So there's a bunch of stuff that can happen. And usually when you're approaching life, because logic kind of plays into life, is like you need to consider a bunch of conditions at once. So I have my keys, I have my shoes, it's not raining, I have gas, I don't have a prior engagement I need to go to. It's a bunch of things that happen. So logic and an and an or is how we can kind of combine this into a very effective way. And we're going to do this in a really bare bones way before we make it complicated. And what we're going to say here is let's just make two new numbers. I'm going to redeclare num1 to be 10. And I'll make a second one num2 again. These are the same from above, but we're going to redeclare them. And I'll make a fourth one num3. He'll be 12. So I have 10, 11, and 12. So now this is where conditions get a bit more confusing, and we can kind of work with it a little bit. And so essentially, an or, let's actually look at or because or is more straightforward. Some of us might have heard these terms before. If you haven't, that's fine. When we write it out in English speak, it's going to make more sense. And let me just double check the PowerPoints. Did I cover the... Want to make sure I'm not going too off the beaten path here. Okay, they don't, but it's fine. We'll cover it a little bit. So let me see here. Okay. So or in JavaScript is okay, let me see if we can get this here. For Mac and PC, it's these two vertical lines, and what it's doing is and or are going to check a secondary or one or more conditions. So usually if we're working with a single condition, it's going to be just something like this. Num1 is less than num2. What we can do now here is actually check two different conditions. So console.log num1 is less than num2. Let me make one more. Oops. Cool. Okay. So we'll see our complex logic statements. I recopied what we did previously. Num1 is less than num2. Of course, 10 is less than 11, so we put it down there. What I'm going to put after this is, you know what? Let me make sure that this is for sure true. I can put in these two vertical lines, and the way I'm doing it is that if I press Shift on my keyboard and I have a backslash, it's to the left of the delete key on my keyboard. You're going to want to put in two of these vertical lines. I'm going to actually copy them into the Zoom chat. You should be able to use these vertical lines. If you look up vertical lines online, it will give you them. What this will be doing for me is this is the English equivalent of or. So I can be something like this now, where is num1 less than num2 or num2 or is num2 less than num3. Okay. My screen's getting a little, make it a bit smaller there. Okay. So this is this type of logic here. And essentially an OR condition is going to check either one. It's going to say, is num1 less than num2 or is num2 less than num3? And this is how we can kind of make a bunch of conditions occur. And you'll have a more complicated website now. Has the user clicked this button or have they looked over there? Now, in my complex logic statements, we'll see that this is true. Now, why do folks think this is true? Well, one of my conditions here is true. So is num1 less than num2? Yes, that's true. Or is num2 less than num3? Yes,
true.
That's also true. And so it doesn't really matter about or right now. They're both true. So the thing's true, right? Now let's get a little bit more complicated here. Console.log num2 is less than num1. So num2 is num2 less than num1. Or is num2 less than num3? So what I did here, is just swap those two guys around. What do folks think this might give me? Here, we could try to run it and figure it out. Yeah. See here. So my first one gave me true. Weirdly enough, I get true as well. Well, not weirdly, but yeah. So I'm getting true here. Why do folks think I'm getting true? So again, if we read it in English, is num2 less than num1 or is num2 less than num3? This guy is true, right? So an OR condition doesn't care if everything else is false. If one of your conditions is true, then the entire thing is true. So essentially, you can do that in this scenarios again with like a bunch of different scenarios in life. It's like if I have a car or someone can pick me up, or if I have bus fare, I'm going to go to the store. Let's just say that I don't have bus fare and I don't have a car, but I do have someone that can pick me up. Then I'm still going to go to the store, right? Because I have ways to get to the store. I don't care that the other two are false. As long as one of my conditions is true, which this one is true, my entire statement is true. Okay. Does this make sense to everyone? How this statement is true even though that this guy is false? Or is this a bit confusing? Yeah. Okay. Dude, the silence means you guys are getting it really well. Okay. So let me do one more condition here. Let's do num2 is less than num1 or num3 is less than num2. What folks think might give me what this will be? Is num2 less than num1 or is num3 less than num2? Let's go ahead and see what happens here. We'll get false right here. So now this is giving me false. And it's something that I can't really deal with because all these conditions are true. Because all of my conditions are false, the entire thing is false. So or is a bit like where I have I just need one thing to be true. And now is this other one that I want to take a look at for us. Let's go ahead and say it here. What I'm going to say now is and is a double ampersand, and like so. And the way that and works is the opposite of or. So if or requires at least one statement to be true, and requires every statement to be true, or every condition to be true. So I can log something, console.log, num1 is less than num2, and num2 is less than num3. Okay. If I rerun this guy, we'll see I'm getting it as true. Let me go ahead and copy this guy down here. And let me grab this guy too. So now I'm going to change these double verticals to ampersands. What I'm going to say is num2 less than num1 and is num2 less than num3. We saw earlier in my second guy at line 77 that this was true because one of them was true. In this scenario, one of them is false and the other one is true. But it doesn't care because it needs all of them to be true. Okay? That's what ands work with. So you could say here again in our logic, did the user click it and did they enter in their information? So this could be good for a contact form check. And let's do the last one more time. If all of them are false, is num2 less than num1 and is num3 less than num2? Then you'll see here that they're false. So you'll see here that the scenarios shift around based on these guys. You can get really complicated with them as well. You could do something like, is num1 less than num2 and num3 less than num1 or num1 less than num2. So this is where you can get a bit complicated with them. You don't need to worry about this for right now, but I just want to show you how this logic works. So the way that we would read this is num1 less than num2 and is num3 less than num1 or is num1 less than num2. If these guys fail, but this guy is true because we have an or statement, we'll see that the entire thing is actually true. Okay? So again, you won't be really asked to go beyond this and statement here. I will say that you only need to really know these guys here, but this is how basic logic in coding languages works, and this is how you approach them for most of them. Okay. Okay, so using these guys where we have these trues and falses, I just want to briefly look at the if statements here, because I'm kind of summing up chapter 9 for us here. And the PowerPoints, I don't like this saying read them or whatever, but there's a few operations. What is that from Division 2? Okay. On here, there's quite a bit of operations. I won't be able to cover all of them. So please look through the chapter 9 one just for more information with them. But let's go ahead and just take a look at the if statements here really quick in our code for JavaScript. See here? Cool. And again, we saw from earlier my is rating code from up here. Let me put it all the ways down here. And so now I'll say var is rating is equal to true. And we'll say if is rating is equal to false, console.log it is not rating. You'll see here that I'm getting no output down here. So what I could say down here instead is if is rating is equal to true, I could say something like it is rating. Now, because my console, my var is rating is true, then this if statement is true, so it prints. Now, the opposite of doing this, because we'll see that we have two if statements going on right here, is instead of saying something like if is rating is equal to false, we remembered from just now that our scenarios are either one or the other. It's either true or false. So if this scenario isn't true, if it's false, then we might encounter a scenario that's the inverse of it. And this is where this concept of else comes into play. So instead of just putting this full line code, I can simply put down an else. Okay? So instead of saying if is raining is equal to false, I can now say false console.log it is raining. So I get it is raining, and if I go ahead and put false up here, my condition is true. It is not raining. Okay? So this one is true now, and this guy doesn't run. Okay? Okay. Thanks. And one more thing. Let's see here. I don't think we need to go past into the yep, so we actually briefly covered the else if format. So what we could say here is else if. This scenario is else if with if there's different scenarios. So we could say something, the is rating is a basic else if scenario. But we might encounter scenarios in Java that are a bit more complicated. So we might consider an if, else if, and then an else scenario. And where that might occur is with our kind of boundaries of values. So what we could say here is let's just make a number, var number. Let's set it equal to 5. Now we could have these scenarios now where it says if number is less than 0, I can console log something where I say this number is negative. Now, how about I, instead of saying 0 here, I also say something to my log where you know what? I want to say this number is greater than 10. Okay, so let me do something like this, where if the number is negative, so let's say if it's a -1, I log this number is negative, which works out just okay, but let me put a 5 here. We'll see here that my number is equal to 5, but my code still runs this where it says console.log this number is greater than 10, which isn't true. My number is 5 and it's not greater than 10. So this is where scenarios of ands and elses can come into play. So what we could say here is something like else if number is greater than 0, and we want to make sure that we keep it in the range of those two values. So I'm going to say and number is less than 10, console.log number is between 0 and 10. Is greater than or equal to 0. So it's a lot of code at once that's going on here, but the general idea is that you're kind of just adding more and more onto the other areas. And again, we can make it work with HTML a bit, with just syntax of HTML. But those examples provided for you, you can kind of make them work a bit better for the homeworks and stuff. It's easy to kind of shift the examples into code for yourself there, but I just wanted to make sure we got the general logic of how to approach them. Okay. Now, if I go ahead and run this guy, we'll see that I get numbers between 0 and 10. If I make this guy -1, this number is negative. If I make this guy a 12, this number is greater than 10. Okay? So if I'm making a 5, this number is between 0 and 10. Cool. So this is how my if else's and stuff will work for me here. Okay.